Welcome back to Colonial Crossfire's post-debate coverage here in our studio in Washington, D.C. I am Jessica Nix, and we are back with our panel to discuss everything that happened in Ohio tonight. We are with, on the left, Keith Nagy. He is the D.C. College Democrats, and he is a sophomore. And on the right, we have John Olds, and he is a junior with the GW College Republicans. Welcome back to you both. So what did we see tonight in Ohio? Tonight's debate was 3 hours of quick attacks and lengthy plans. We saw quite a few jabs at top-tier candidates from a lot of middle-tier candidates. We saw some moments that may help candidates rise in the polls and some that may help them kind of step down a little bit. So let's get started with our little analysis. John, what was your first reaction to tonight?
My first reaction was that we really got introduced to Amy Klobuchar for the first time. We saw the gloves kind of come off for her going at Senator Warren about her plans on health care. She went at Tulsi Gabbard for her plans in the Middle East. And I just thought that was a welcome change for Senator Klobuchar.
Keith, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that Senator Klobuchar had an amazing night tonight. I would also add Pete Buttigieg to that list. He showed that he's able to confront these heavy hitter candidates like Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, and he held his ground very well. He showed a lot of courage on gun control as well as challenging Warren on health care. So I think great night for Mayor Pete.
So who do you think won? What are your main takeaways from that?
I mean, Biden is still going to be the front runner, and Elizabeth Warren's probably going to go back and forth with him in the national polls, I think. But I would expect to see a surge for Klobuchar and Buttigieg tonight.
John, who do you think won?
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. And I think Joe Biden, I don't know that he handled it super well, the questions about his son, but I think that he persevered enough to not be really hit harshly in that line of attack. But yeah, Senator Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, they definitely had really good nights.
So what were some standout moments, John, that you saw for sure?
So the first moment that really stood out to me was Cory Booker in, I want to say it was the first question, was talking about the impeachment process. And I know that we'll probably get to that in a little bit, but he talked about how it's not about partisanship and it shouldn't rip the country apart. And as a Republican, I look at this whole process as somewhat hasty. How are we going to go about this very solemn process of impeachment with by not tearing the country apart? So that was the first standout moment for me. The second, of course, was the Mayor Pete versus Tulsi Gabbard foreign policy debate. We'll touch on that in a little bit. And the discussion about the wealth tax, that was also very interesting to me.
Keith, what were some breakout moments you saw?
Yep, so I have some breakout moments highlighted in red here. The first one was from Amy Klobuchar on the healthcare debate. I thought she had a great line. She said to Elizabeth Warren, "At least Bernie has been honest about how we're going to pay for this." That was a very nice jab. I think she's probably had that framed for a while. And she also said, "Let's protect Obamacare, not kick 149 million people off their health care." And she said to unite around ideas, let's not bicker with each other, let's take this fight to Donald Trump. I think that's an important note that Senator Booker also echoed when he said tearing each other down because we simply have a different plan will be disastrous for 2020. I think that's the message that all Democrats should be echoing tonight. And of course, Buttigieg, I think, had an outstanding clash with Beto O'Rourke over gun control. The line that sticks with me tonight is, I don't need you to lecture me about courage.
So John, who do you think lost? For who do you think this is the end of their campaign after tonight?
That's tough to say. And, you know, I feel like after many of the past debates, we've seen these kind of, you know, showy moments, like with, for example, in one of the first debates, Kamala Harris went after Joe Biden, and she saw a very small bump, but really since then she hasn't grown in the polls, and in fact she's probably slipped. So I want to be careful about who we say are winners and losers, but I think that Tulsi Gabbard didn't have a great night. I don't think Tom Steyer, who I learned recently qualified for this debate, I don't think he had a particularly stellar night either. But those are just some thoughts off the top of my head.
Keith, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, less than impressed by Tom Steyer. He's new to the stage, so he obviously had higher stakes than any of the other candidates. He didn't quite meet the threshold for me. I would say that Tulsi Gabbard took quite a hit from Pete Buttigieg, and I think she had some good clashes with Elizabeth Warren, but I don't know if it was enough to get her the bump that she really needed in this debate. Same for Andrew Yang. I think that he had a few good lines, but still, the stakes are very high for him, much higher than they are for the top tier candidates. I don't know if it did it tonight.
I do want to just piggyback off of that. I totally forgot about this. Beto O'Rourke had a not great night.
Yeah.
He was hit pretty hard about his gun confiscation policy, and when pressed on the details of that and the logistics of that and how that would be carried out in practice should it become law, he had no idea about his own policy. I mean, Anderson Cooper literally read off of his website, this is what you say you will do, and he kind of equivocated, didn't quite give a straight answer on it. And when you're running for president of the United States, at the very least, you're looking for some sort of straightforward answer on policy, and we didn't get that from Beto O'Rourke tonight.
So after our first general reactions, let's get into some specific topics. Right on the minds of everybody right now is definitely the impeachment inquiry, and that was the first topic that the moderators definitely hit on. So for you guys, is it wise for Democratic candidates to support impeachment so early in the process? And they all made the case for impeachment, so who was most compelling in their case for impeachment? Keith, let's start with you.
It's definitely not too early to talk about impeachment. This is a critical moment in our country's history. Every Democratic presidential candidate should be at the forefront of this issue. And, this is the one issue I think that there's consensus in the field. So it really just matters who carries the most weight with their words. And basically, Joe Biden probably had the most weight to his words, given that he is at the center of the Ukrainian allegations. I feel like he could have been a little bit stronger when it came to defending his son Hunter, and the moderators correctly noted that these allegations by President Trump are completely unsubstantiated. So Biden probably could have milked that a little bit more, but definitely no slip-ups on that front.
John, any thoughts?
I don't find myself doing this very often, but I do want to echo what Cory Booker said. He mentioned that that this is not supposed to be a partisan process. In fact, it's a very solemn process. And there are very serious allegations that are being thrown around right now. And at least, looking at it as, from a Democratic perspective, you don't want to be seen as the impeach Trump party. They probably want to be seen as a party of ideas. So I guess if I'm giving advice to Democrats is don't really focus only on impeaching Donald Trump. Focus on what your alternative vision is tonight. And I think we did see a decent degree of that. But
absolutely.
Do you think the candidates are definitely wasting their time talking about impeachment then?
No, I mean, Secretary Castro pointed this out. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. Senator Klobuchar said we can focus on advocating for working families and also defending our democracy against this presidency. I think that's the approach that you should go with. Obviously, we should not make this a partisan process. It's a very solemn and momentous occasion in our country's history.
Any thoughts on that, John, about touching on impeachment still?
Again, nothing to add. Just be, when you're going through this, you got to be careful, and we should follow the facts wherever they lead, and we should, certainly have investigations as warranted, but we shouldn't rush to judgments.
So another big topic that was on everyone's minds tonight, healthcare. So Elizabeth Warren still did not say or was even clear about how she's going to pay for her healthcare plan. She's now tied to be a front runner. She's in that top 3 with Biden and Sanders. Can she keep dodging this question about not paying for her healthcare plan, and will it have any repercussions?
So she had a moment on the debate stage that was fairly fascinating to me, and it was almost an allusion back to 2016 with Marco Rubio, where she kind of kept repeating the same line about, under my plan, the rich will pay more and the poor or the middle class will pay less. Now, she was asked that question in the context of, are you going to raise taxes? Which is, and what she said was not a direct answer to that. And she kept repeating it, and I just kept thinking to myself, who's going to be the one to pull the Chris Christie here and kind of, call her out for, repeating the same talking points about a plan that, in my opinion, is unfeasible and wrong for the American people.
Keith, any thoughts on that?
So I love Elizabeth Warren, and I believe that Medicare for All can be a viable policy option, but I'm a little bit disappointed that she was not honest with the American people tonight. Like Amy Klobuchar said, at least Bernie's honest about how we're paying for this, because this is going to require raising taxes on almost all income brackets, including the middle class. And Warren just kind of evaded that answer again tonight. I think she should have been more straightforward. I think the American people would have appreciated her honesty on that. And I think it's also why Mayor Pete had a really standout moment tonight. He confronted her on this issue saying, you're not giving us a yes or no answer when we clearly deserve that. And he used that opportunity to push Medicare for all who want it, which is seeming more and more popular as polls show.
So this is the fourth Democratic debate that we've had so far in this election season. And it's the fourth time that we've seen this extensive healthcare debate. So John, was this one any different? And does this surge to the top of the healthcare debate? Did anyone kind of stand out to you tonight on healthcare?
Well, in terms of, and again, as a Republican, I'm not following the Democratic primary process as closely as other people. I think Mayor Pete's policy seems to be something of a middle ground between the public option people and the Medicare for all people. His seems to be kind of like a choice-oriented Medicare for all. That was interesting to me. It's something I hadn't really heard of before. But again, from the Democratic Party, it just seems to be more of the same, free this, free that. Somehow magically we're going to lower your deductions, we're going to lower your healthcare costs, and we're not going to tell you how we're going to pay for it. So that, I don't know, just didn't seem to be much different than the norm.
So Keith, did you have any thoughts about who stood out on healthcare tonight?
Yeah, Mayor Pete, I thought definitely stood out on healthcare. I'm glad that Kamala Harris raised awareness about reproductive healthcare, largely being excluded from the dialogue in the Democratic debates. Beto had a line that I took a little bit of grievance with. He said that Warren seems more focused on being punitive than lifting people up. I don't know if that's a fair attack. But overall, I thought it was a rough night for Elizabeth Warren. But Bernie, on the other hand, he did defend Medicare for all very passionately, as he always does. I would take grievance with the fact that Democrats make all these free this, free that plans without saying what they are going to do to pay for it. Bernie has, in fact, said we are going to raise classes on the upper class and the middle class.
And speaking of Bernie, let me cut you off right there. We do have some breaking news. According to the New York Times, AOC is going to endorse Bernie Sanders. What is your initial reaction?
That is not surprising to me. Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez actually came to Kansas to canvass for one of our congressional candidates in the 2018 cycle. So they've been pals for a very long time. It's not too surprising.
John, any thoughts on that?
My initial reaction is that one of the most successful lines of attack for the RNC and the NRCC has been that every Democrat is just one and the same with AOC. So hearing that, I question Bernie's ability already to appeal to voters in the heartland and in the South and in key primary states and key states in the general election. I don't know how much this will help him.
All right, so back to the debate tonight and different things that we saw. We did see this back and forth between two of the veterans on the stage, Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Congresswoman Gabbard, on the topic of Turkey and Syria, which is also a big news item that's going on in everyone's minds right now. What was the significance of this moment between the two of them? Keith, let's start with you.
Right, I thought this was one of the best moments of the debate. I love to hear their different perspectives on this, both of them being veterans. Buttigieg specifically said he was very passionate about the damage to American credibility because of the Syrian withdrawal. I thought that was probably the best moment of the debate for him. Tulsi, on the other hand, I think she kind of used this as an opportunity to dispel these rumors of her being a Russian asset. She specifically called out the New York Times and CNN. I think she kind of drifted from the subject a little too much and made it about herself a little bit. But overall, I thought it was a good moment for both of them, including when Buttigieg said to Tulsi, I think you're dead wrong on this issue.
Any thoughts, John?
Yeah, so and when Mayor Pete talks about his perspective on this, he brought up an interesting point that other candidates, and including many Republicans in Congress, have brought up, that leaving the Middle East so abrupt, or leaving the northern Syrian border so abruptly, isn't actually ending any sort of war. It's just exacerbating a conflict that was ready to reach a boiling point. So I don't understand how folks that tend to be a little more isolationist can justify their ending endless wars claim when more people are being killed, civilians are being slaughtered, and dictators are being propped up as a result of, frankly, President Trump's actions.
So more on different attacks that we saw tonight. We saw a lot of attack on the front runners from those middle tier candidates. Is this the right direction for the Democratic Party? Keith, we'll start with you.
So I am of the mindset that we should not be rewarding infighting. We saw that Kamala Harris took a jab at Joe Biden, the front runner, way back in July. And although she did get a very temporary bump in the polls, she has dropped significantly since then. So even though the reward may be significant, it's very short term. So I don't really look favorably upon some of these more personal attacks, like Beto saying that Warren is too punitive, or Biden saying that Warren and Bernie are like too vague about their plans. We need to be focusing on the policy aspects of this, and for the most part, candidates have stuck to that. But yeah, keep it out of the personal business, I think.
John, any thoughts?
So I don't know that I have any ground to stand on telling Democrats how they should lead their party, but what I will say is tonight seemed to serve as something of an audition for particularly Mayor Pete, Senator Booker, and Amy Klobuchar and I mentioned Mayor Pete.
Yep.
Anyway, as something as of an audition for the vice presidential slot. You know, the VP traditionally plays a little bit more of an attack dog role. These are younger players, a little more vital, and they showed that they can, have good policy chops and, play the attack dog role. And balancing out someone at the top of the ticket that might be a little more statesman-like, I think that's got to play into the calculus of their debate performances at some point. So.
All right, so my last question for you both. After tonight, what are your reactions to who would be the best in a general election debate as of tonight? Keith, you want to go first?
Oof. So I am not endorsing any candidate until I cast my absentee ballot in April. But I will be clear, my preference was Elizabeth Warren going into this night. I think that she is vivacious, she is passionate, she's also very genuine. I think that's very critical for a general election candidate. But on the other hand, I do recognize that Biden is leading in general election matchups consistently. So at the end of the day, it's going to be about who can beat Donald Trump. I will be judging by general election matchups as well as fundraising when I cast my ballot.
John, who do you think would do well?
I really don't know. But we know the president, and we saw this in the 2016 primary. He loves to play the attack dog role. And anybody who's willing to kind of throw that shade back at him would be the optimal choice, at least from an entertainment standpoint, purely, if we're looking at it from that lens. Amy Klobuchar, she's got some killer one-liners. So I'd be interested to see how that would work as a dynamic on the debate stage.
All right, great. Well, Keith, John, thank you both so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
For GWTV and Colonial Crossfire, I am Jessica Nix. Thank you for watching, and thank you for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you next time.